What's up, everybody?
What's up?
Welcome to our third or fourth installment of our mix breakdowns,
where we show you all behind the scenes of the track, how we put it together, the production, the vocals, some of the thought process behind the track, and this one is Learn to Fall.
For those of you who haven't heard this track yet, we just put it out last week. Super excited to share it. It was a long time coming. And let's dig a little deeper into the song.
Thanks for joining. Let's dive in.
So first, I'll tell you a little bit about the story behind the track. This one came about probably 3 or 4 months ago. We were on the internet somewhere. We saw that a DJ that we listened to, or producer that we listened to, was doing a remix contest for one of his songs. So I went in and downloaded the stems. We had an idea where we would both have the acapella, go off into our separate rooms and kind of just make a bunch of ideas, chord progressions, beats, things like that over this acapella, and then see which one we liked the most, develop that into a full track, and then release that remix. What we ended up doing was kind of trashing that project, but salvaging the beats and the chord progressions that we made underneath the acapella. So this track initially started out as a remix behind that. And we'll tell you exactly which elements have developed since then, which have stayed relatively the same, and kind of where we got that jumping point.
What was this one called initially, the production, remember?
It was called...
Not Miami, that was a different one, which was also cool.
Something that was like... with the... Well,
moving on.
But to jump into that, one of the first elements that was created over top of the aforementioned acapella was this bass line here. So that's the main kind of cycle that goes through. That's the progression right there. So this was started over the acapella that we had, and then we added in some percussion elements as well. But before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about the sound itself here on the bass. So this is a Diva. This is VST that we use to create some sounds. I love this VST so much. It really has like a warm kind of analog feel. We do have an analog synth, but we started producing and pretty much learned everything, at least I know, about sound design on soft synths. So it feels at home, but you can get a lot of power and a lot of texture in your sounds through Diva. So for this sound, it's relatively simple, but as you can see here, right, we have the parts of the song labeled, and this is the cutoff. So essentially we have a low pass filter on it that's only letting the lower frequencies out, but then as this cutoff rises, it starts to let out more of the meanness and the growl of that bass. And then as we move up to the hook, it rises a little bit, and then in the drop, right, it's at its peak, but not all the way up, because that's too much.
Right.
And then here on the second drop goes a little bit higher, and then sends them off all the way up, because we want that energy to be as high as it can at the end.
And another thing we did with this one, like Red said, there's not a ton of automation and modulation on it, but we did spend a lot of time on the velocity of the notes themselves. Like you can tell there's a really, really different sound with these guys based on where we call these lollipops, based on where these are. And we spent a ton of time playing with like what the right sound was. Just doing a little example. It's like a completely different sound.
And it's always tricky with an element like that, the velocity, it changes the sound so much, but so does the cutoff. So it's always tricky balancing, what exactly is this doing to the sound? Can we live without that? Or, what exactly is this other factor doing to the sound? And, do we want that, or can we live without it? And that's pretty much a decent run through of the bass. I mean, obviously we have some layers here as well. One that's important to talk about is this layer here that I'll solo. So it's almost, it's a lot duller, but it gives a lot of body. It's almost like a butter knife. It just provides a support to the bass that's already on top of it, but all of the sharper frequencies that you're hearing in most of the sound, this is both of them together. The The really sharper frequency that's hitting the note, the very tonal thing of it, is this top bass. So that's kind of the main one in our minds.
You say butter knife because it's not as sharp as the main bass. The main bass is like a steak knife. Is that the analogy you're trying?
Steak knife or a skewer, a kebab stick.
Okay. Yeah, I like it.
Then, while we were continuing to make the track, like I mentioned earlier, the percussion came next after this bass. So with percussion, I mean, that's everything from hi-hats to clap to kick drum. Usually we separate percussion and then clap and then kick. In this walkthrough, we're going to talk about it all in one because it all really does tie together. Right, you can really see how that all ties together. The clap is a little bit more subdued than it is in some of our music, but we think that really fits with the mood. And here we can look at the actual MIDI from that percussion. As you can see, the lollipops are really just all over the place. With those elements kind of moving about as much as they do, the hi-hats here are really basic. Right, there is some variation in the velocity, as you can see here when we expand that. But for the most part, the pattern itself gives you something to rely on. You can kind of lean back and trust that it's going to be there with the same cadence that it was before. Whereas these elements are a bit kind of more jumping around left, right, panning a little bit, and then this one is a special sound. It's a very reverbed out tom. And that makes it feel a bit more distant. It's not part of this same drum kit. It's maybe somebody else in the orchestra sitting further back, just chiming in every once in a while, just making things a little bit more interesting, dash of flavor. Yeah, I mean, that's a quick run through of the percussion. We could go in on each individual element. You can see here we just utilize drum racks. It gives us a chance to drop in a bunch of instruments, or a bunch of sounds rather, and then just like quickly test them. Before, back in the day, we used to just drag audio directly into Ableton.
Back in the day.
Which is, you can make a track doing that, but this gives you a lot more control. You can change things like the attack, the delay, the sustain, the pitch really easily for all of the samples rather than clicking each one and changing the pitch. So yeah, we moved into using drum racks, and that's what we have here.
So yeah, going back to that intro section, we have these bells and a piano layer here that when we were figuring out how to start this song, well, I guess first we had this layer going throughout. And it changes throughout the song a little bit, but really it's just like that main constant note that rides with the progression, but also has a bit of a percussive element to it in terms of the rhythm it provides and the backbone it provides. And we had that, it was really quiet, and we decided to bring it out a little bit more, especially in this intro section. We were figuring out how to start the song. We thought this kind of staccato, one note, could be a really cool way to intro it. So that's how we ended up with this intro here. Like the first thing you get is that taste of that bell, that piano coming in together, everything forms around it, and you understand where it comes from. But we actually had just these mid plucks until probably like a few days before we finished the song. We decided to add this piano element on top of it, which we got from, I believe it was Alicia Keys. Yeah, we use this piano a lot, do a lot of editing to it, and then add effects until we get it to a spot we like. Yeah, and like if you're listening to the song, depending on the type of headphones you're using or the speakers you're listening to, that sub's not going to be super clear. It's not going to be easy to hear. But when you combine it with the bass and the percussion and the groove that's already established, it really helps keep it moving. So we'll just listen to that. Let's throw the kick and the bass on with the sub. we don't always do this with the sub. Sometimes our sub is essentially just a layer to the bass that just sits lower and provides those frequencies that you need in order to fill out the track. Other times we get a little fancier with it and have a sub that's doing something completely different than the bass. And more so these days, I think that's a lot more interesting, and I think it's a really cool thing. We actually have a very similar thing going on with Problematic, coming soon, which has like a different bass and sub pattern. And this one, like you just heard, they're really different. They're doing different things. But I think even though those frequencies are really low, it gives you more. It gives the listener a little bit more to dance to. It gives them a little more to feel. And when we first put this in, like the sub sounded bad and it was like too much clashing. But once you're in the mixing stage and then you're adjusting the sound, you can really get them to mesh well together. And that's how you find that balance that just feels good, both on the dance floor and in the headphones.
Alongside those bells that Rome was talking about earlier, one of the first elements that you hear in the track is this pad here. We'll solo that. It's really delicate and soft, peaceful pad, but it provides a good bed for the whole track. Right? The track feels a bit thin with it turned off. So more of a support instrument, but as you can tell, the sound selection is still really important because you can't just throw a sound on and expect it to clash with other sounds that you've worked really hard to develop. So we feel like this one is both beautiful but very understated.
Yeah, another cool thing that a pad allows you to do is you can make changes or like small modifications to the chord progression and to what's being played without totally changing the vibe of the track. So another thing we did relatively late in the stage of editing this song was in the drop sections, we had the pad go to a different spot in terms of the notes that were being played. So in the first drop, you see these higher notes up here. They don't happen earlier, but they provide a little bit more emotion. And especially in this second hook, when we have the breakdown and things are really emotional, we're able to go even higher. And you might not have heard it like when you were listening to the track, but it really does provide a lot more. And it doesn't, if those notes are being played in the arp or a synth, then it's really like, okay, this is high, this is new. In the pad, you can kind of get away with having it there as like Red said, it's support, but it's important support. So we'll just hear how that develops in this section here. Yeah, so just those high notes in there, it really builds up. And when you're trying to get to a drop in an emotional section like the breakdown, that stuff really makes a difference.
It's what really...
The bread and butter.
The bread and butter. Couldn't have said it better myself. But it's very recognizable. We're actually watching a video on YouTube of a producer actually pretty similar to this video we're making now, but he used the term hypnotic. And I think that perfectly describes kind of our mindset developing this sound, because it's repetitive, right? We can look at the MIDI here and it's coming back and forth with the same notes over and over. But that's so kind of quintessential to the vibe of just being lost on the dance floor, just kind of just going wherever the music takes you. Having something that's both melodic but hypnotic at once, and doesn't get old because we're doing a lot to it as well, is really key to making, in our opinion, very euphoric music like this. So you can see here, there's just countless things that we're doing to continue to develop the track and develop the noise itself, so that it's not, just ba-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na throughout 3 or 4 minutes of the song. Another thing that, on a technical side, that I'll talk about with this ARP is essentially the way we made space for this to be as loud as it is and the bass to not lose any aggression. So here we'll just play the full track. So it's really important that bass line is very recognizable. But then, like I said, the ARP is really the kind of MVP. So what we wanted to do was make sure that the ARP was loud enough, but still not cut away from the high frequencies of the bass. So we use this thing called track spacer. It's essentially sidechain compression, if you're familiar with that, but essentially multi-band, right? So it's specific to the frequencies that the bass is pushing out. It grabs, it says, hey, okay, it's pushing out X dBs at 250 hertz. So it'll grab 250 hertz of this sound, the main, and pull that away. But it will leave all the frequencies above that alone, so that it can still have that aggression and that sharpness to it. And that was really clutch in developing this, because both things can have their space to play nicely with each other without just smashing the whole signal whenever the bass line hits.
This was another thing that I added after Red kind of built the bass, like the production, the foundation is the word I'm looking for, of this song. And we're just going to play with the percussion so we can bounce with it a little bit. I think we're going to want to clap with this, my friends.
I'll give them the clap.
Well, yeah. Phrasing. I believe that like the second verse needs to have a different element to it than the first verse. It needs to build on it. It needs to be cooler. You have to do something to keep the listener engaged. I think a lot of that comes in the vocals and the singing, but if you can build something like a foundation around the vocals that keeps the listener engaged and have, a cooler verse, cooler lyrics, I think it really helps the song keep going, keep elevating, keep taking the listener to a new spot. So we always try to, like, if you ever hear a song of ours where the first verse sounds exactly the same as the second verse, then we either messed up, or we've changed our philosophy completely, or someone had us at gunpoint while producing. Because we always want to add something new. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it's got to be a little simpler than this. But we thought this really gave it a little bit of an extra bounce. And yeah, very, very happy that this one made it through our final cuts.
Mm-hmm. Elevate. One thing I want to show real quick, and this ties just into what you were saying with elevating the track as it progresses. There's an additional synth that we added in here in this dropout period, right? So here's how the song sounds. Didn't see it coming. Good. And here's the element that I'm talking about. It's kind of a hyper high kind of synth thing that comes in, and then on the drop we have, instead of this on the first drop, we have this sound, and see if you can pick out that element. That's another kind of subtle thing that it's not getting lost in the mix, but it's blending in pretty well, at least we think, where it can just add some energy and kind of keep the intensity going. So yeah, always keep elevating or progressing. It doesn't always have to go up. It just should change. It should develop. But yeah, shall we talk about some vocals?
Let's talk about some vocals.
Excellent.
So for the main vocals on this track, you might have noticed this as you listen to it, but it's a little bit more complicated than most of the main vocals that we do, and I think it's really one of the things that makes this song work really well. Initially, when I was working on the writing for this track, I had this main line, this like starting with the ooh, starting with that all figured out. Ooh, it's just the price we pay. And that's cool, but it's not nearly as cool as what we're able to do with the harmonies that we add to it. So I'm just gonna play the full track, I guess, without the harmony. Let's listen to that. Not the full track, but this section.
Oh, it's just the price we pay. There's a fold in the fabric.
Yeah, so we really added a ton of harmonies on this line here and this line here. And it's all about emotion. It's all about adding emotion to the sound, to the words. This song is an emotional song. It's about love. It's about not being able to find love, not being able to commit to love, not understanding how to fall in love. There's a lot of yearning, there's a lot of confusion, and in order to build that, you do it through the production, you do it through the writing, but you also have to do it through the delivery of the vocals and how you compose the vocals. So if you listen to these two together by themselves,
Oh, it's just the price we pay.
I actually figured out that vocal harmony on the piano and showed it to Red, and he was like, okay, this is pretty dope. And then, yeah, kind of wrote from there.
Yeah. That is Learn to Fall. Those are a lot of the elements that went into the track.
Let us know if you have any questions or are interested in hearing more about our process. Hopefully it gave you a bit of an idea into how we think, how we produce, and how we put together Learn to Fall. Thank you for watching, as always.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time.
Cheers.
Peace.